My father's first words on entering Westminster Abbey yesterday were a pledge of service. It was a pledge to continue to serve, because for over 50 years, in every corner of the UK, across the Commonwealth, and around the world.
There are two kinds of power inside the British royal family. The first is the kind the public sees: crowns, balconies, state banquets, official portraits, formal titles, carefully staged moments of continuity. The second kind is quieter and often far more important. It lives behind gates, inside private estates, in inheritance structures, household arrangements, and decisions that never appear in a palace press release. That is where the real future of the monarchy is often shaped, not in ceremony, but in access, not in speeches, but in ownership. And right now, if the reports and speculation swirling around royal circles are even partly true, that quieter kind of power is moving steadily toward Prince William. This is what makes the current moment so fascinating. On the surface, King Charles remains the monarch. Queen Camilla remains at his side, and the institution continues to perform stability. But underneath that visible order, another question is becoming harder to ignore. What happens after Charles? More specifically, what happens to Camilla after Charles? Not in theory, not in abstract protocol, but in practical, personal, deeply uncomfortable terms. Where would she live? What would she be called? Who would decide how much room she still occupies inside royal life? And perhaps most significantly, how much of her current security depends not on tradition, but on the goodwill of a man who is not her son and never truly chose her. That is the tension at the heart of this story. Because if Prince William is already shaping the conditions of his future reign, and there is increasing reason to think he is, then Camilla's future may be far less settled than it appears from the outside. Royal stability has a way of looking permanent until you begin asking what exactly is permanent, and for whom. The first layer of that question involves property. Royal property is one of the most misunderstood areas of the monarchy, because the public tends to imagine everything as belonging to the royals collectively. It doesn't. Some residences belong to the crown, some belong to the state, some are held in trust, and some are personally owned. That last category matters most here because personal royal property is where family feeling, private law, inheritance, and future authority collide. Balmoral is the clearest example. It is not just an emotional symbol inside the family, it is a private estate, one of the few places that belongs personally to the monarch rather than to the institution in the broad public sense. That means that once Charles inherited it, Balmoral effectively became part of his private world. And when Charles is gone, that private world does not automatically remain organized around Camilla. It passes onward, not to the state, not to some neutral body, to William. That single fact changes almost everything.
And actually, going through what you and the rest of the family have gone through.
I think when you are bereaved at a very young age, anytime really, but particularly at a young age, I can resonate closely to that. You feel pain like no other pain, and you know that in your life it's going to be very difficult to.
Because it means that whatever comfort Camilla currently derives from her place within the king's personal world may eventually be filtered through William's authority. Balmoral may feel like part of her life now, but under a William reign, its meaning changes. It becomes one of the personal spaces of a new king, and the new king is not bound to structure his household around the preferences of the widow of the previous monarch, especially when that widow is his stepmother rather than his mother. That distinction is not cruel. It is constitutional, emotional, and dynastic all at once. And it explains why this conversation refuses to go away. One of the more revealing details in the broader speculation around Camilla's future has been the reported transfer of her own private property, Ray Mill House, to her children. On paper, that can be interpreted in perfectly ordinary ways. Maybe estate planning, and maybe a tax-conscious family move. It may simply reflect a woman getting older and organizing her assets sensibly. But royal life makes ordinary acts look loaded because people know that timing matters. A quiet property transfer in a normal family is one thing. A quiet property transfer by a queen consort married to an aging king with health concerns becomes something else. It starts to look like preparation. Preparation for what is where speculation begins. If Camilla has transferred one of her long-associated private retreats to her children, then people naturally ask whether she is securing her own line of independence or narrowing her future options. Does that transfer indicate confidence, prudence, or an understanding that once Charles is gone, her position inside the royal private landscape may become more uncertain than anyone says aloud? This is where William enters the story in a more decisive way. There has been a growing sense for some time that William does not intend to inherit every arrangement, loyalty, date, or family accommodation that defined Charles's era. He has already shown, in other contexts, that he is willing to review inherited structures rather than preserve them out of sentiment. That instinct matters here because a monarchy is not only shaped by who ascends the throne, it is shaped by what that person chooses to continue and what he chooses to quietly end. When observers point to William tightening his grip, what they are really noticing is a pattern. He seems less interested in indefinite, informal, blurred arrangements, especially those built around networks not directly rooted in duty. He appears to think in terms of structure, accountability, and control. In his world, the future monarchy is slimmer, more contained, more carefully bounded. That does not leave much room for ambiguities around who gets access, who gets influence, and who gets treated as if proximity to the king automatically creates standing in the next reign. That is why even relatively small personnel or estate decisions attract so much attention. The reported removal of Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll was not explosive in itself. It was, on the surface, an administrative choice tied to William's stewardship of the duchy after inheriting it from Charles. But symbolism matters in royal life, and the symbolism was impossible to miss. A woman long connected to Charles and Camilla's world no longer automatically belonged to William's. One era had ended, another had begun. No public row followed, none was needed. The point had already been made, and once that point is made in one area, people naturally begin projecting it into others. If William is willing to redraw lines around the Duchy of Cornwall, what lines might he draw around Balmoral, Sandringham, Clarence House, and the broader personal world that currently surrounds Charles and Camilla? What does continuity look like when the future king is not emotionally invested in preserving every relationship that gave shape to his father's household? That question becomes sharper when one considers the emotional history between William and Camilla. Their relationship has never been simple. Public civility should not be mistaken for deep comfort. William was old enough to understand what Camilla represented during the breakdown of his parents' marriage. He grew up under the shadow of a family wound that was both personal and internationally visible. Time, duty, and adulthood may have produced a workable peace. But workable peace is not the same as unqualified trust, and in royal life, trust matters more than surface harmony.
Yeah, so we have to go back 5 years, and this is when they first stepped away from their lives as working royals, and so they struck an agreement with the late Queen to walk away. And as part of that agreement, they said they would keep their HRH, and they're technically styles, just that's the nomenclature. They would keep Her Royal Highness, His Royal Highness, but they would not use them. And this follows in the past practice. Prince Andrew, when he stepped away from royal life after scandal, he still has the HRH. He does not use it. Everything seemed fine. And then this week, as you said, she was on this podcast with her friend Jamie Kern-Lima, who showed a gift basket, and there was the card that had the HRH. And it's like, and everyone kind of went, uh-oh. And I think that Harry and Meghan's camp really very quickly realized this could be a problem, because they have been talking about the fact that they are separating things. They're saying, oh, we're using it in our private life, but we're not using it commercially.
That is why the more dramatic claims about open hostility are less interesting than the quieter reality. William does not need to be openly at war with Camilla to determine her future. He simply needs to inherit authority. Once he becomes king, the structure itself does much of the work for him. Titles may follow tradition, but visibility, influence, and practical privilege are all matters of choice, and choice in the next reign will belong to William. The title question illustrates this perfectly. If Charles dies before Camilla, she does not vanish from royal life, nor does she become equal in status to Catherine. She enters a more ambiguous category, often described through the language of dowager status. But even when tradition points one way, the modern monarchy retains room for emphasis, framing, protocol, and symbolic adjustment. What she is called publicly, how centrally she is placed, how often she appears, where she lives, how large her household remains, all of that depends not only on precedent, but on the reigning monarch's instincts. And William's instincts, if current patterns mean anything, are unlikely to be expansive where Camilla is concerned. That doesn't mean humiliation, doesn't even necessarily mean punishment, but it may mean containment. A clear, careful, polite narrowing of role. Enough respect to avoid cruelty, enough distance to define a new reign on unmistakably different terms. That seems increasingly likely because William's overall vision for the monarchy points in one direction: smaller, cleaner, less diffuse, less crowded by semi-royal or quasi-royal arrangements. He and Catherine appear to want an institution that feels more immediate, more family-centered, and yet more controlled, not sprawling, not emotionally messy, not overloaded with leftover networks from previous chapters. In that vision, Camilla occupies an awkward space. She is important now because Charles is king now. She has weight because her status is derived from his, but once Charles is gone, she is not the mother of the new king. She is not the founder of the new era. She is the surviving consort of the old one. That may sound harsh, but in dynastic systems, those distinctions matter enormously. The Queen Mother occupies one kind of symbolic place. A stepmother to the king occupies another. The reverence, deference, and permanence are simply not the same. This is why stories about yachts, absences, private confidence, or assumptions of permanence matter even when they are hard to fully verify. They resonate because they touch a deeper fear, that Camilla may believe her position is more durable than William intends it to be. Whether or not every reported anecdote is true is almost secondary to the underlying tension they reflect. There is a widespread sense that Charles's reign has provided Camilla with security, prominence, and legitimacy, but William's reign may subject all three to review, and review is the key word.
As my grandmother said when she was crowned, coronations are a declaration of our hopes for the future. And I know she's up there, fondly keeping an eye on us, and she'll be a very proud mother.
Do you miss your grandmother?
I do actually, yeah, I do miss my grandmother. And my grandfather, particularly being in Windsor. For me, Windsor is hers. Sometimes I'd come round and have a bit of tea with her because she had the best teas ever, so I used to get well fed.
Everything in this story points toward review. Review of titles, review of living arrangements, review of household structures, review of who belongs where and why, review of the difference between what Charles tolerated, what Camilla enjoyed, and what William is prepared to continue. A monarchy in transition does not need a public feud to reorder itself. It simply needs time, inheritance, and a new set of priorities at the top. That is why the question, where will Camilla go, feels so much larger than a housing question. It is really a question about whether Charles's personal world survives him in any meaningful way, or whether it is quietly dismantled and reorganized around William's preferences the moment the constitutional center shifts. Clarence House may remain an option. Certain formal honors may remain untouched. Public respect may continue. But the emotional and logistical center of royal life, the sense of belonging at the heart of things, and what seems most at risk, and William is not hiding what kind of future he prefers. He and Catherine have made choices that suggest a monarchy rooted less in palace grandeur and more in controlled, domestic symbolism. Their life at Adelaide Cottage, their emphasis on family stability, their focused project work, their increasingly distinct public identity, all of it suggests that William wants to inherit the crown without inheriting all the old furniture of royal life around it. He seems to want the authority without the clutter, the institution without the excess, the monarchy without the sprawling emotional complications that have damaged it repeatedly. From that point of view, Camilla becomes less a person than a test case. Can William reshape the monarchy while treating her fairly? Can he honor his father's wife without allowing his father's household to spill too deeply into his own reign? Can he be generous without being governed by inherited sentiment? Those are not easy questions, and they may define the moral tone of his kingship more than people realize. Because however one feels about Camilla personally, what happens to her after Charles will send a signal. It will tell the country and the family how William handles legacy, ambiguity, and private power. It will reveal whether he is hard-edged or measured, whether he thinks dynastically or emotionally, whether his version of modernization is generous or merely efficient. For now, the answers are incomplete. Charles is still king. Camilla still stands beside him. The visible hierarchy remains intact. But beneath that surface, the real movement has already begun. William has property, authority, time, and the force of succession on his side. Camilla has present status, but uncertain future footing, and the monarchy, as always, is pretending not to feel the transition while quietly reorganizing around it. That is what makes this story so compelling. Not the tabloid version of a wicked stepmother and a furious prince. Not the melodrama. The structure. The fact that in royal life, the most consequential battles are rarely fought in public. They are fought through inheritance, through households, through estates, through names on payrolls, through titles that subtly rise or fall, through invitations that continue or stop. They are fought in the difference between being included by habit and being protected by right. And Camilla, for all her current prominence, may be discovering that those are not the same thing. So when Charles is gone, will she have anywhere left to go? Yes, almost certainly. But the more revealing question is this: will anywhere she goes still feel like the center of royal life? That answer may already belong to William. What do you think really happened behind palace doors? Was this the right move, or is there more to the story? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more royal drama and insider updates.